Welcome, everybody, to another episode of I Would Say the Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, also the managing editor over at Wide Right and Natty Light over at I Would Say it's SB Nation's site. Happy to be back again this week as we close in yet another week closer to the 2025 football season. I believe Iowa State will be starting fall camp either next week or the week after. I think next week, like late next week. Is when we'll start seeing fall camp. And once you're in fall camp, the season's right here, right there. We are basically essentially 1 month away from kickoff in Dublin right now, which is incredibly exciting. And in 3 weeks, I'll be on a plane. I'll be on a plane to Dublin myself. So 3.5 weeks. We're getting close, and it's been a long summer. It's been a long off season. We just got to tough it out for just a little bit longer. The main thing we're going to talk about this week, though, since we are diving into camp, is we are going to be talking position battles. Fortunately, this is this year you've got a few positions that are pretty well lined out. Especially some of your most important positions, you have it pretty well fleshed out on who's going to be starting where. Especially the main one, which Iowa State, has absolutely no controversy whatsoever at the quarterback spot as Rocco Beck returns for his redshirt junior season. Quarterback has been a position of remarkable stability under Matt Campbell since since basically the beginning of 2017, since the week 4 of 2017. For the most part, Iowa State has had little to no quarterback controversy. If you really want to iron it out to no quarterback controversy, you would go back to October 6th of 2018 when Brock Purdy took over in the second drive of the Oklahoma State game, and Brock Purdy happened. Then Hunter Deckers took over for a year, and then he left unceremoniously, and now we're here at Rocco. Quarterback has been an amazingly consistent position for Iowa State, and it looks to be that way in the foreseeable future, as Connor Mobley and Alex Mansky will be theoretically battling it out for whenever Rocco is done. But this is going to be an offense that has a lot of returning pieces. But the main thing everybody's interested in is the receivers, as the Dukester alludes to here, which we'll talk about receivers here in a second. The first kind of the first recruiting battle, or not recruiting battle, but the first position battle that I want to talk to is not really so much a battle for. I mean, it is a battle, but not in terms of like, oh, who's gonna get snaps and who this. It's more about how the workload is going to be distributed, which is at the running back spot. Obviously, you bring back Carson Hansen and Abu Sama, two very good running backs that have their own, that have a body of work behind them over the last 2 seasons, showing that they absolutely can be very, very good running backs. Carson Hansen is really especially kind of broke out last season and down the stretch towards the second half of last season. Abu Sama started the season as the starter, began the season as the starter, and then eventually we saw Carson Hansen take over down the stretch, as he just proved to be a really, really great downhill runner for Iowa State and in the passing game as well. But that certainly does not mean that Abu Sama is out of the picture or anything like that. I think Abu is a film room away from being a really, really, truly excellent running back. Where some of it's just his vision and knowing at what pace to hit the running lanes, and when to burst through them. Then you've got Dylan Lee waiting behind those two, who we've heard lots of good things in camp before, and he was a highly touted freshman coming out of high school. And then, as the Dukester mentions here in the comments, I'd like to say I do want to point out that I did bring up River Peppers back in January about how excited I was to watch River Peppers. We looked through a little bit of his film here on the on the stream here back in January, and I was very excited about him then, and I am still excited about him now. So Matt Campbell dropping his name at media days and hearing more people around the Cyclone Media start talking about River Peppers feels a little gratifying too, because I can say I was about 6 months early on that one from anybody outside the program on recognizing that River Peppers is a very talented kid, in that he is, when you watch his high school film, it looks a lot like Dave Montgomery's did. You know, is he the absolute, is he a god tier, does he have god tier balance at running back? Not necessarily to the level of like David, but he's really tough. He's elusive. He's got a little bit he's got deceptive top end speed, but you see, it's hard not to watch him and see a lot of David in just kind of what he does at his toughness and his elusiveness, and his home run ability as well. So, I'm interested to see how this is going to shake out. I mean, Carson Hansen and Abu Sama will definitely be the two feature backs, but in the past, Matt Campbell has not been afraid to, give 3 or 4 guys the ball. And specifically, they do tend to lean with the hot hand. If Abu Sama's having a great game, they're going to keep feeding him the ball. If Carson Hansen's having a good game, they're going to keep feeding him the ball. If Dylan Lee gets, 5 carries and picks up, 25, 30 yards on those 5 carries, they're going to keep giving him the ball because they're going to, they like to ride the hot hand at running back. Obviously, Hansen and Sama will get the bulk of the carries up front, but if either or both of Dylan Lee and River Peppers are able to put together some really good, some good stretches and put together some really good carries, we could see them get more. The trick with River Peppers here is kind of the trick with River Peppers is that you have a lot of guys in front of him that are known commodities that are very good. And they're going to be here for a couple more years. Sama and Hansen are both just redshirt sophomores. I think Hansen, are they true sophomores? Sorry. Sama is a true junior, and I think and Carson Hansen is a true junior. So they've got 2 seasons left. You really, they can, redshirt guys can play 4 games. I would be shocked if we don't see River Peppers in at least 4 games. Especially if he's like ready to go. But I would be pretty surprised if they decided to burn his red shirt this season. Just because there's just no reason to. In 2026, assuming nobody transfers, you're going to have your entire running back room again in 2026. I say assuming nobody transfers, but you're going to have your entire running back room back. And, you don't want to be burning years of eligibility when you can't get somebody, a good chunk of the carries. And so you don't really want to burn River Peppers' freshman year, his first full year of eligibility, when he has to sit behind and share carries with at least 2 other, probably 3 other backs. So I think we'll see River Peppers in at least in his 4 redshirt games at minimum. They're not going to burn his redshirt unless he is like really exceptional in his carries, like really, really good. To the point of like where you can't keep him off the field type of thing. If that is the case, great. I would say having another weapon out of the backfield, especially one that can kind of do anything you need him to, like River Peppers can. That's great. But he'll need to be a really big time, like breakout performer, I think, for that to be the case, where they burn his red shirt. So it's just a matter of who's going to be getting the share of the carries. It's not so much a matter of like, oh, I don't know who's going to be starting because we're worried about who's going to be emerging. You could take any of those 4 guys and throw them out there, and I'm sure Iowa State would be happy about it. I'm sure like if they were told that they needed to start Dylan Lee for against Kansas State, I'm sure they would be fine with that. But you'd obviously rather have Hansen and Sama out there because they have more experience and they've got a body of work behind their play that shows that they can be a really good 2-headed monster out of the backfield. So interesting battle here. We'll just see. Like I said, I don't know if it's a battle so much to see who's going to start, like it will be for other positions, but just I'm curious to see how this shakes out as far as who gets the lion's share of the touches. The first actual battle that we're gonna take an eye out though is the receivers. We talked about it just a touch ago. Um, Obviously, you lose um, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins to the draft, replacing two NFL receivers, two day two NFL receivers, and two of the probably five or six best receivers in school history, depending on where you want to put Jaden Higgins. Just based on him only being here for 2 years. It's kind of they were able to replace them with guys that appear to be, as far as athleticism and ability goes, at least especially as far as athleticism goes, appear to be basically one for one replacements, with Chase Sowell being a 1-to-1 replacement for Jaden Higgins and Xavier Townsend being a 1-to-1 replacement for Jalen Noel. Will they be as good as those two? We'll have to find out. We will only find out through game reps, but if you watch their film and how they were used at their previous schools, and you look at their physical measurables, their height, their speed, things like that, and you look at their skill sets and what they're good at, you basically did about as good as you could in replacing Higgins and Noel. You did the best you possibly could in that. Obviously, Xavier Townsend knows Rocco and has played with and against Rocco in the past, in high school and all that. So those guys have a good rapport. And I expect that connection, especially to be, pretty dynamic early in the season, pretty much from the get-go, I would assume, especially because Xavier Townsend is plenty athletic to be used on like end arounds and things like that, which he was used quite a bit at UCF as kind of the jet sweep kind of guy as a gadget. However, what's after Soul and Townsend is kind of most of the question here. Let me pull up the roster here. We'll look through some of the guys and we'll talk about a few of them. Okay, so obviously you got Soul and Townsend up there. As I would assume, as of right now, barring like injury or something like that, those are going to be your number, your X and your Z, right there. Now, look at a few of these other guys here. Eli Green had a good start against North Dakota last year. What we found out eventually is that he was dealing with lots and lots of injuries, like the rest of the team. But after he had a strong game against North Dakota, and I think a lot of people were expecting him to kind of be that. If Jalen needs to come off the field, you throw Eli Green on there, and he's the same player. And he just didn't show up the rest of the season. It turns out it was because of injuries. So we'll see what Eli Green can do, where he fits. Again, that's another, like I said, he's a very similar play style and athleticism and body to Jalen Noel and Xavier Townsend. So naturally, that would be a spot where he would fit on the depth chart and within the offense. Brett Eskleton got some good time last year, just as a true freshman. So he's just going into his true sophomore this year, but he played basically every game last year. And did get a couple catches against Cincinnati, and he does again. He did get technically marked as the starter in the Miami game. So, assuming that Soul and Townsend slip right into Higgins and Noel's spot, Eskleton might be your third starter just right there, just based on what we saw in the Miami game. But obviously, they've got different guys available on this that will be in contention there. But Eskleton's kind of a really good, solid possession type receiver, the classic white slot receiver. Obviously, a little bit on the taller side for that, but kind of that. Carson Brown seems like he's been at Iowa State forever. He played even as a redshirt freshman. Kind of just a reliable possession guy, where they like to throw to him on third down and things like that over the middle of the field. I don't know if I see him being the third guy, but he'll get lots of snaps. He'll get targets and stuff like that throughout this, get a few targets a game type of thing, and be there. Dominic Overby is probably the one of the returnees that I'm looking at as like, okay, this could be the guy that we see really break out this season. He was a big time track athlete in high school. I believe he set the Utah State long jump record. Played in his redshirt games last year. He played in his redshirt games last year because he played his 4 regular season games and the postseason doesn't count. So he played in 6 games. Hey, only made the one catch, but you know, his size, he's 6'5", 200. He runs sub 11 in the 100-meter dash. He's a guy that if he can get the fundamentals down, if he can get the his craft down as far as his route running and his hands go, his ceiling is super, super high. I would absolutely expect to see him on the field against Kansas State. Maybe he's the guy that can emerge as the third starter there. But we'll have to see. But like I said, the frame and the athleticism are absolutely there to be a really, really exciting receiver. Speaking of exciting receivers, this is your dark horse for freshman that could see the most playing time, and that is Zay Robinson out of West Des Moines Valley. Zay Robinson in high school was nothing short of like electric. He was a fabulous, fabulous utility player for Valley. Um, Returned punts and kicks, was a receiver, played some corner, did a lot of different things and does them really well. He's a very high end athlete that, frankly, the reason that he is maybe not at a blue blood right now and somewhere like playing for Bama or Georgia or something like that is because he had some injury problems in high school. If he can stay healthy and he can avoid those injury problems in college, Zay Robinson has absolutely every potential in the world to eventually be Iowa State's number one receiver, be the focal point of the passing game, all Big 12 type of player. He is that athletic and that dynamic as a player. Will he play a lot early? Probably not. I mean, in camp, they could stick him back at punt and kick returner, and maybe he's electric back there. And they say, we got to have this kid back there. I hesitate to endorse putting a true freshman, like burning a true freshman's red shirt just on special teams. Like, you wouldn't want to do that. But he's got the athleticism and the explosiveness where you could absolutely see, if he's just blowing people away in camp in the first few weeks of the season, when Arizona comes to town, maybe you see him get a few snaps and, has a couple really nice plays. And all of a sudden you start seeing him more and more and more and more. I would be, if he stays healthy, I'm not sure I'm not sure it's even possible for him to not eventually make, crack Iowa State's starting rotation as long as he remains healthy and, keeps working on his, follows the normal development curve of a college receiver as far as, learning the offense, things like that. As long as he takes, dots his I's and crosses his T's and stays healthy, Zay Robinson is an elite dynamic athlete that will be an X factor for Iowa State at some point. How soon is going to be dependent on a lot of different things, but his health was going to be one of them. Speaking of health and needing to stay healthy, Daniel Jackson returns for this is I think this would be his he's a 6th-year senior, I believe. Unfortunately, he was slated to be one of the probably the third starter last year, but he tore his Achilles in fall camp, and unfortunately, the injuries have kind of been an unfortunate story of his career. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy since he came here. He came here. His freshman season was the COVID year. He was a class of 2020 guy. And you'd love to see him stay healthy and get a shot. I don't know what that looks like. Is he back enough and is he ready to really contend for the third spot in the rotation? I'm not sure. It just depends on what he's feeling like. Achilles take a long time to come back from. Like, most of the time, Achilles injuries can take a year or more. We'll see if he's ready to go. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see him get playing time. He deserves it. We just got to see what he can do. Michael Parks is an interesting player. If you have played either college football 25 or 26, eventually Michael Parks can develop into a really nice receiver for Iowa State. We haven't seen him a ton on the field so far in his early in his career. He redshirted 2023, didn't play at all last year because he was injured, but he's an athletic guy. We will see where he can end up, So we literally have not seen him on the field um, yet. So if he can stay healthy, maybe he's a guy that can start eventually working his way into the rotation. A few other guys, kind of some walk-ons: Carson Robbins, Wyatt Archer, Jonathan Vandewall, Karan Brookins, Sam Zelenovich, um, Dylan Malone, Ty Claiborne. Not hating on any of these guys, but these guys I think have work to do to get into the rotation. If you were asking me to pick somebody right now to be the third guy, like this is who's going to be the third receiver, be the Y, I would guess probably Brett Eskelson, just based on him starting the Miami game. But Dominic I would say Eskelson and Overby are probably the two clubhouse leaders for that Y spot. But it's hard to say. I guess right now we just they're both young. They both haven't played a ton. And they both have the ability and the athleticism to be there. We just have to see more. And we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, either way, Iowa State runs out, eight receivers in a game, most games. So it's kind of one of those where you're just, everybody's going to get some run at some point. But I think right now, if I were to put money on it, it's going to be Sol Townsend and either Eskelson or Overby. But I would say maybe 50.1% Eskelson. Next up is going to, I think, the offensive side of the ball actually is interesting because the other two positions, the tight ends and the offensive line, are actually, I don't think there's a lot of much of a position battle to be had here. Tight end is kind of similar to the running back in that you've got Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle. You've got those two. They're both very good. Ben Bramer needs to stay healthy. Had too many injury problems in his young career so far. But if he can stay healthy, he is a fringe Mackey Award kind of guy. If you can have those two on the field, a lot of plays, you can cause a lot of matchup problems for a lot of defenses. Beyond that, you have some really interesting names. You've got, I would say the next guy as far as pass catchers go, that I'm really excited to see is Cooper Alexander, who was a big recruiting win for Iowa State out of the state of Oklahoma, where they beat out the Sooners to secure Cooper Alexander for the class. We'll see. He was a really good pass catcher in high school. We will see what they do with him. And then you've got Tyler Moore figures into that mix as well. It seems to me like he's kind of become the heir apparent in that kind of H-back, F-back type role where we've seen like Dylan Sainer and Sam Seenbuckner in the past. And then last year, or the last few years, seen a couple of different guys. But, it's I really think last year I can't, for the life of me, I don't know why, for the life of me, I cannot remember the F-back's name. I'm not sure why. I'm completely blanking on it right now. Let me pull it up because I don't want to embarrass myself any more than I already have. It is. Damn it. Why can I not come up with it? Steve O'Klotz. I don't know why I couldn't think of Steve O'Klotz. It's embarrassing for me as the Iowa State guy, but here we are. Steve O was the H-back the last couple of years, kind of your blocking tight end / fullback guy that they sometimes leak out for passes. Seems like Tyler Moore is starting to kind of work his way into the role, the heir apparent of that position. So I think with the tight end spot, I do believe that at some point we're going to see 13 personnel. You're going to see 3 tight ends on the field. I'm fairly confident of that you will see 3 tight ends on the field at some point. You're never going to see less than one. You're never going to see less than one. You're never going to see a set with 0 tight ends. My guess is the average for Iowa State for tight ends on the field at any point in time is like 1.8 probably. I think you're going to see a whole lot of 12 personnel. And for that reason, maybe the third receiver is not quite as important as maybe we might think it would be, because it is listed as a starting position on the depth chart. But at any one point in time, you're going to have at least 1 tight end, maybe 2, sometimes occasionally 3, where your third receiver is Ben Bramer. It's not, it's not Brett Eskelson or Dominic Overby or Carson Brown or whoever. It is Ben Bramer or it's Gabe Burkle. So I would say the tight end, the depth in the tight end room gives you tons and tons of flexibility with your schemes and your alignments and your route patterns that you can do a lot of really really fun things. And I think Iowa State is particularly excited to reestablish its dominance in the tight end room, especially if Ben Bramer can stay healthy. On the offensive line is the room I think we all agree on the offense that needs to take the biggest step forward. They were like okay last year, but they weren't great. They had some, they unfortunately also dealt with injuries. Dylan Barrett goes down. Jalen Travis doesn't actually play the first few games. Turns out to be very good, but doesn't play the first few games. Dylan Barrett gets, starts really well and then gets hurt. You've got a few other guys that are hurt along the way. It seems to me as though you've got your probably top 6 guys, roughly. Like right now, my projected starting 5 would be James Neal at left tackle, Dylan Barrett at left guard, Brendan Black at center, either Jim Boniface or Trevor Burr at right guard, Tyler Miller at right tackle. I think those are your first 6, and I think you've got positions lined out for them pretty well. The entire question is not necessarily who's going to be in the starting 5, I don't think. I think the question is what forward steps can they take to continue to improve in run blocking, so that way you aren't like your running game isn't like almost 100% reliant on having that F back there, where you can have your 5 linemen and a tight end on the field and let that be the fuel for your running game, and not you don't have to supplement with 2 tight ends or an F back or whatever just to run the ball. Okay, they need to take that next step forward. Rocco does a good job of staying off his butt. For the most part, he does a really good job at avoiding sacks. They need to continue to do that so he doesn't have to scramble so much out of the pocket to avoid sacks, and he can start really tearing defenses apart from the pocket. But then in run blocking, it's been such an inconsistent group, really over the entire Matt Campbell era, to the point where you really need them to start taking steps forward, especially when you've got so many guys coming back, and you've got talent in the room. You've got some of your guys in the room. Bram Black's a junior. He should be looking like a junior. He should be looking like an upperclassman on the line that knows where he's got to be, that is in position. He's where he's got to be. Trevor Burr has been in the program for a few years now. He needs to stay healthy, but he also needs to be the guy that looks like he's been in the program for a few years. Tyler Miller was pretty good last year. He needs to be Iowa State's best lineman on that right tackle spot. And then James Neal, who would have started last season had Jalen Travis not transferred in, but he was a little inconsistent earlier in his career. He needs to look like an upperclassman on the offensive line. But I don't think this group is so much a position battle to find starters as it is to now they're trying to gel. They're trying to get their chemistry down. They can really focus on this is our group, and they can get better starting in camp rather than trying to find the guys in camp. So I think that's a bonus for Iowa State for sure. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. So fortunately for Iowa State will have, in most games that they play, in a lot of games they play, they will have the best individual player on the field in Dominique Orange. I would say in most games, I don't know if I can think of anyone right off the top of my head. Maybe Arizona State with Sam Levitt, but for the most part, Dominique Orange is going to be the best player in the stadium most games that Iowa State plays. And he commands a double team on his own. But unfortunately, outside of him, the pass rushers last year were not good. The pass rush was bad. In the game when J.R. Singleton and Dominique Orange were both hurt, Kansas went incredibly poorly for Iowa State because they had zero pass rush. And that is not going to work this year. The schedule's a little tougher. They're playing Arizona State and they're playing Arizona State in the regular season this time. They've got a few other trickier road games. They've got to go to TCU. They've got to go to Oklahoma State, which who knows what Oklahoma State's going to be. But, they've got a little bit tougher games this time around. You're not, you don't play Utah this year, but you don't get to have a spot on your schedule with a Utah team that everyone thought was going to be good. And turns out they were terrible. Iowa State has to find a pass rush this year. Now, this doesn't necessarily only have to come from the defensive end spot. We can talk about, this is kind of going to mold into partially a linebackers discussion as well, even though the linebackers is a situation like the running back where you're not necessarily worried about trying to find a starter and fill holes, but you're just trying to figure out how your rotation is going to work out because you have so much returning depth. But, Iowa State did bring in guys to try to address this. But time will tell on how well this goes. Iowa State really hasn't had a plus pass rush since Will McDonald left. Let's take a look here at our roster. So you've got some interesting names. Miles Mendozun has been in the program for a long time. Started out as a linebacker, is now a defensive end. He's played a bunch last year. You'd like to see him take a step forward. The thing with Miles Mendozun, though, is he's a redshirt senior. He's been here forever. Played all 14 games last year, finished with 14 tackles, and just a half of a tackle for loss. He's a great special teams player. Awesome. Love that he's a great special teams player. You need those. However, that's not good enough. I need Miles Mendozun to take a step forward and not just be a special teams all-star. I need him to be a pass rusher. Vontroy Malone is one of the transfers they brought in. He's coming from Tulsa, 6'4", 265, good size on the defensive end. We did see a video with him in it. I think Cyclone Football put it out last week, where it's just interviewing some guys, on campus, doing the man on the street type of interviews. They were talking to him a little bit, but he's a fairly physically imposing guy. I think Jamison Patterson, was interviewing some people wherever, and Vontroy Malone looked big compared to JMO, who is a good size safety. Vontroy Malone is all of that 6'4" measurement. He's a fairly physically imposing guy. Now we will see how productive he can be. He had 25 tackles last year, 5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks, which unfortunately would make him more productive last year than any of Iowa State's other pass rushers outside of Dominique Orange and J.R. Singleton. Absolutely 100% a candidate to be the starter. One of the starting defensive ends. We'll see it from there. Another transfer they brought in, Tamatoa McDonough from Yale. Ivy League only plays 10 games last year, but in 10 games had 27 tackles and 6.5 sacks, and recorded a sack in 5 straight games. Specifically had 2.5 against Princeton. You like that? It's Ivy League, but we actually did just pull an offensive lineman from the Ivy League, and he was very good. So just because he's from the Ivy League doesn't mean he can't be good. But he was productive at Yale. Maybe I don't know if he's a dominant pass rushing force, but he was absolutely productive at Yale. Absolutely in the conversation to be in that that top end of the defensive end pass rushing role, along with Vontroy Malone and a couple other guys we'll see down here as well. Next guy on the list here is Trey Verdon. He's Malik's little brother, true freshman, 6'1", 250. I remember walking past Trey Verdon, and I'm 6'1", and Trey looked a little bit shorter than me. The 6'1" might be a touch generous, but I'm not trying to hate on Trey Verdon. But he doesn't have exceptional size for defensive end, but that doesn't mean he can't be good. Will McDonald was tall, but not very big. 250. If Trey Verdon is 250, then he weighs 15 pounds more than Will McDonald ever weighed in college. And sometimes being short can help you get better leverage and all that too. So being short isn't necessarily a big deal on the defensive end side if you've got a good motor and all that. I would be kind of surprised if he showed up a lot, more than his redshirt games. But you never know. They're, like I said, the defensive end spot is wide open as far as I'm concerned. If you're going into camp right now with guys, they're like, oh, these are the clubhouse leaders at defensive end. I don't think that's the right approach here, because they need to find guys. The only two spots you've got locked down on your entire defensive line is you've got Dominic Orange at nose tackle, and you've got Zamir Hawk either behind him or next to him as a defensive tackle. Like, that's all. That's the only thing you've got solidified on your defensive line right now. Charlie Wolleben, I don't know too much about him. He's a true freshman.'He's got good size, 6'4", 245, but I don't know if he'll be ready to go. Jack Limbaugh, same kind of, true freshman. Needs to put on some weight there, 6'3", 230. Kamari Moore, another true freshman. He's got the size, 6'1", 320. That's good size to play defensive tackle right away. Not sure if he'll be ready to go or not, but especially because you've already got Dom Orange and Zamir Hawk there. Jace Gilbert, the other Jace Gilbert from Wisconsin, whichever one you want to call the other Jace Gilbert, but the defensive line Jace Gilbert, redshirt freshman, obviously redshirted last year. Good size at 6'5", 280. This could be his chance to break out. He only played in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This absolutely can be his chance to break out. I think he's probably more of a defensive tackle, but obviously typically has moved guys around. Annie Wazirike was the same size, and they were not afraid to move Annie around between tackle and end spots in college. So, certainly in the running there. Elijah Carnell, I don't know a ton about him. Comes from a really good high school program in Bishop Gorman. That's a big high school program, nationally relevant high school program. We'll see. Good size. Kenny Eziogu is one of the guys that I would have earmarked along with Miles Mendezun as like, this is a guy that has the potential. He needs to take a step forward. He needs to step up and be the guy we kind of thought he could be. You really need Ike to take a step forward and establish himself in this rotation. He's got the size, 6'5", 285. He's a pretty physically imposing guy. You just need him. You really need him to have his breakout year this year, or at least push other people to have a breakout year this year. Braden Simonson, redshirt junior. He hasn't played a ton up to this point, I don't believe. Maybe some. Yeah, he's just been a practice squad guy, so I don't know if he's really a factor in this. You got Dom Orange there, Chet Andrews, BJ Carter is another defensive line spot, another defensive tackle type prospect at 6'3", 310, great size. Cannon Butler is the last defensive end on this list. They brought him in. He's a transfer from UNI, played at Waterloo Columbus. He was fine at UNI. He did put together 59 tackles in 12 games, which that's partially a product of UNI's system that, their defensive ends are going to rack up more tackles. Even if he started and played 100% of games at Iowa State, Iowa State's system isn't going to allow for that kind of tackle number, but 59 tackles, 8 for a loss and 1.5 sacks. He was fine. That certainly doesn't mean he can't step up and be a good pass rusher for Iowa State, and maybe refining his role to being a pass rusher can help him boost that sacks number up a little bit. He's got the size to compete at, 6'6", 265, pretty good size dude. But is he the magic bullet here at defensive end? I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if any of these guys necessarily are. Cannon Butler, Miles Mendezun, Kenny Eziogu, Tomatone McDonough, any of these guys, and frankly, my guess is that all of these guys will figure into the rotation earlier in the season. Vontroy Malone as well. But they more than anything, they need at least one or two guys to step up and really establish themselves as like, okay, you can rely on these guys to put pressure on the quarterback. Because right now, last season, you just did not see it. The other part of this too, though, the pass rush absolutely will be supplemented with the linebacker group, who is bringing back 1 million players that have started games, including, most specifically, Caleb Bacon. Now, the thought was before last season that Caleb Bacon was going to be the starter at middle linebacker. Ends up breaking his leg on like the second special teams play of the game, gone all season. Now that you've got so many returning players back, you've got, Caleb Rosina will be healthy again. You've got Carson Willich, you've got Cooper Ebel healthy, you've got John Klosterman, you've got Will McLaughlin and Bo Goodwin, and and Rylan Barnes. You've got tons of guys that played and started games last year and have started previously in their careers. You don't need Caleb Bacon to be your middle linebacker anymore. You can let Caleb Bacon be a supercharged version of his 2023 self, who was essentially a guy that just pinned his ears back and rushed the passer. In that role he was awesome. He was amazing as an edge rusher in 2023. I would love to see him be that guy. I want him to be Von Miller. I want him to be, primarily a pass rusher that can drop into coverage when you need him to. He needs to be the game wrecker for Iowa State on defense. Caleb Bacon, Will McLaughlin has the ability to do something like that too, but they need to supplement the pass rush with those types of guys off the edge, knowing that you have experience. And Bo Goodwin did some of that a little bit last year towards the end of the season, especially. You need those guys to be involved in the pass rush, especially because you just have there's so many unknowns at the defensive end spots, and because you feel pretty good about what's behind them as far as experience. In the kind of the core group of the interior linebackers, your Sam, your Will, and your middle linebacker, that you can use Caleb Bacon as a stand up edge rusher. However that has to come together. Maybe you can find a really high end defensive end there to rush the passer. Maybe it has to come from linebackers. Either way, Iowa State's pass rush must be better this year. And if the linebackers aren't completely decimated by injuries yet again, that seems like it should happen, but we will see. The last kind of main position battle we see here, I think, is going to be at the corner spot, and specifically the second corner. We already know that Jontez Williams will be the number one corner. He was the best corner at Iowa State last year in a group of very good corners. Miles Purchase and Darian Porter are both in the NFL now. Darian Porter was a 3rd round pick. And, the Iowa State secondary was very, very good last year. Jontez Williams was arguably the best of them. And he will be returning, and the expectations are that he is a first team all Big 12 type of guy. Assuming that is the case, you need a second guy. Right now, let me zip on up here to the cornerback spot. So you've got a few different guys here that I think are interesting. I think there's 3 names here that are really interesting that will all be in the main rotation. I would say typically likes to have 4 corners, a starter and a backup for each one that they'll rotate in and out throughout the game. The first one on our list here after Jontez is a very interesting name in Benny Nagoye, who obviously started his career as a wide receiver, flipped over to defensive back, and actually took snaps in the Pop-Tart Bowl at defensive back. He played corner in college. He's a very similar build and athleticism to what Darian Porter was. I think he absolutely can eventually be a one-to-one replacement for what you just lost in Darian Porter. I would love to see him be a menace on special teams. I would love to see him be that big, athletic, rangy corner that we see that can be just a game wrecker at the back end. We'll see. This is just his first season playing corner. It took Darian Porter, a full season, and then in his second season actually playing games at corner is when you saw him really start to break out and become a very, very good defensive back and a very good player for Iowa State, beyond just the special teams units. But Benny is absolutely going to figure into the rotation at some point this year. Will he be the second corner starting on day one? I don't know. My guess is probably no, just because he's switching positions, unless he is truly just unless he's truly just a natural at the position and he can pick it up just like that. Um, I would be pretty surprised if he was the second starting corner right off the get go, but it's not impossible. And I would be pretty shocked if he wasn't, in the rotation as far as guys that they're subbing in. Maybe he comes in as a nickel sometimes, something like that. Cam Smith is more going to be on the safety part of this. David Coffey is a guy I've heard about before. Tashawn James, I think, is another potential breakout safety. We'll talk about safety here in a second. Trey Bell is another one of these. Is probably right now the guy I would put my money on as being the second starting corner right now. Transfer out of Lindenwood, 6'2", 205, got good size there. Iowa State has typically done well with the slightly larger corners in recent years. Comes in with the most playing experience. I would say right now is probably the clubhouse leader for that second spot. But I think his main competition here would be Quentin Taylor. We've heard good things about him before. I know the staff really likes him. I think Quentin Taylor is the other guy that you probably can look at as maybe being Trey Bell's best competition for that second spot. Now, this is to say that I don't think that once they find their starter, I don't see this as being like a position of weakness for Iowa State so much as it's not as accentuated as a strength as Jontez Williams is, where Jontez is, arguably one of, if not the best corner in the Big 12 right now, and projects to be that this season. If Trey Bell or Quentin Taylor or whoever is there can be Miles Purchase, where he's just rock solid, isn't necessarily some big turnover machine like Jontez Williams is, but just is really rock solid, does his job, doesn't give up any big plays. That's all Iowa State really needs at that spot. And I think both Trey Bell and Quentin Taylor are plenty capable of doing that. We'll just see which one shakes out. My guess is it'll be one of these two. And I would say right now, Trey Bell probably has the edge just based on him being a junior and being an upperclassman, a veteran, but we'll see. Some interesting names here for the future. Interesting name, LaMarcus Hicks II. Obviously, his dad played at Iowa State, was a very good corner at Iowa State, across from Ellis Hobbs. Awesome cornerback too. Would love to see LaMarcus Hicks II really blossom and become an awesome starter, just like his dad. Marcus Neal, I think, is also going to factor into the rotation in some form or fashion this season. Fun name here. Don't really see him factoring into the rotation too much this year, but Hunter Soul, Chase's little brother. I did not know he was on the team until about an hour ago. 5'10", 170. He's a little bit smaller. He's got some weight he needs to get on there, but yeah, who knows? At safety, I think your starters, I think you feel pretty good about. Tashawn James, Jamison Patton, and Jeremiah Cooper, I think these are your three starters day one against Kansas State. There are a few other guys that will definitely factor in. I would say loves to rotate at safeties. Really have a full 6-man rotation just to keep guys fresh, keep them healthy. Because I would say does ask a lot of their safeties. They tend to rack up lots and lots of tackles and be involved in most plays. So Jameson Patton there, Jeremiah Cooper, and Tashawn James. Few other guys. I think Cam Smith saw some playing time last year. Unfortunately, did get kind of burned a couple times. But it's certainly a guy that can step up and be involved beyond just being a special teams guy. Drew Surges will be back. I know he dealt with some injuries last year. We'll see here. I wanted to see more from him as far as kind of taking a step forward from his freshman year in 2023. He was fine, but in deep coverage, he was kind of a problem. I didn't love how he played in the back end sometimes. But he dealt with a lot of injuries last year. And, assuming he can be healthy, he'll absolutely be in the rotation. I know the staff really likes him. So, he'll be in there. Marcus Neal, like I said before, I think he'll be involved at the safety spot in some way, shape, or form. A few other guys here. Carson Van Dinter's coming off of his redshirt year. This is a guy I think, he's coming out of Wisconsin, out of a good program in Kaukauna. 6'3", 210's good size back there. That's kind of Malik Verdon type size. Um, special team scout team, special team scout team player of the year. Love that. That's as a true freshman. That that means that that would be shocked if he's not on kick and punt coverage on this. I'd be pretty shocked. So you'll see him there for sure. Will he factor into the rotation at safety? I'm not 100% sure, but this is a guy. This is a name I would absolutely kind of set off to the side for later and see if he pops up, because I think there's a lot of talent there, and I think he'll pop up at some point. So, just to kind of wrap it up here too. At kicker and punter, you've got Kyle Conradi and you've got Tyler Perkins, pretty much cemented in there. You do still have like Jace Gilbert, who can theoretically do both. Not a lot to talk about there. Feel pretty good about both of those guys, and whatever they need to do. So that's pretty much taken care of. For the return, it'd be interesting to see what they do for returns, because Jalen Noel returned punts and kicks last year. A few guys I think maybe could be involved. River Peppers could be involved. Zay Robinson can be involved. If you're looking at upperclassmen, Xavier Townsend is an obvious one to throw in there. Kind of not freshman, I should say. Xavier Townsend is a very obvious name to throw into the pool. Eli Green, maybe. I think Dominic Overby is probably a little bit too tall. He's got the long speed for doing kick returns, but is probably a little too tall, I would say. Maybe Dylan Lee back there even. I think they've got some interesting guys that, I don't know if any of them are at least right away, going to be as dynamic as Jalen was on punt and kick returns. As long as they have a person that can reliably catch the ball back there and pick up some yards here and there, that would be nice. Jalen Noel on multiple occasions last year really flipped the field for Iowa State by getting a big return in the punt game, or at a big kick return or something like that, where it really gives Iowa State a lot of momentum on their next drive and can flip the field. And finding that kind of guy is such a huge boost for everybody involved. It's massively helpful in the field position game, which is very much the hidden yardage that's kind of built into football games that goes beyond just total offense and total defense. It's did you gain 30 yards on that punt return that made you only have to drive 40 yards for a touchdown instead of 70? That's the kind of thing that can really change games. If you can have a big time returner that can reliably pick up even just 10 yards on a punt return, that can make a huge difference. So I don't know exactly what they'll do there. I think they've got candidates right now. My clubhouse leader would probably be Xavier Townsend, just because I think he's got the athleticism to do it. But that maybe there's a freshman on the team, or maybe there's a defensive back, maybe even, that wants to do it. We'll see. It'd be an interesting thing to watch. I don't know if I'd call it a position battle so much as it is just kind of, let's just kind of see what shakes out. Because unfortunately, like, we can't really, when we're talking about receivers and running backs and defensive ends, we can look at like their tape last year and just see how they played and kind of project how they're going to fit into the offense, or what kind of role they're going to see in Iowa State's schemes. But you can't really do that with the return game, because the only guy that returned kicks last year is gone. You have no film on anybody in this returning kicks in college. I'm sure most or all of the skill position players probably return kicks and punts in high school, but returning kicks and punts in high school is a completely different thing than returning kicks and punts in college. So, we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. There's certainly some names there that I think are interesting, but we probably won't really know until we get to like game week against Kansas State. We might hear something, or we might just find out when they trot somebody out to return a kick against Kansas State in Dublin. Who knows? So that's kind of my thoughts on the Iowa State position battles. One thing I want to shout out, this is not a sponsor or anything like that, but I today just received in the mail a copy of a book called 5-Star Culture. It's by a guy named Robert Arnold. It's a book that just came out. It's available on Amazon right now. But Robert Arnold he's from the Quad Cities area. He lives in Louisville right now, but basically the entire book sort of chronicles the last 30-ish years of Iowa State football, really just kind of going back to the beginning of McCarney and just kind of telling the story about how the program was built, um, through, through the McCarney era into the Rhodes and, into the Chiswick era, into the Rhodes era, now into the Campbell era, and talking about, some of the, just kind of telling the story of how we got here. Um, I'm really looking forward to digging into it. Um, I can say I was honored to have Robert actually reach out to me and be a consulting person on this. Look at me right there below the legend, Brent Bloom. But so I helped actually consult on this book. So I don't get a cut of this or anything like that. I'm just saying, check this book out. Robert did a really nice job with this. He was very thorough. Talked to a lot of really in the know people that are deep into Cyclone lore and really understand the history of the program. And he did a nice job with this, and I'm really looking forward to reading through a lot of this in detail. So again, that's 5-Star Culture by Robert Arnold. You can check it out on, I know it's available on Amazon. I'm not sure if it's available anywhere else, but definitely worth picking up if you guys are looking for a nice book to read, especially on the plane ride over to Ireland. That'll be a good book for you. So appreciate everybody for checking in. Appreciate all the comments in the chat and all that. A few of these, I apologize for not always grabbing some of these here, but Dukes is here. Safety is definitely the most intriguing position on defense. 2 guys leave. We'll see if others can step up. Drew Surge is a name to keep an eye on. Absolutely. The nice thing is that the guys you have stepping in, and JMO and JMO, maybe Cam Ward, Tayshaun James, all those guys have played a lot of snaps for Iowa State. So, especially JMO, he's played so many snaps for Iowa State. So he's kind of felt like he's been almost a starter for the last couple of years anyways. So, it's nice that you can just put those guys in there and you're not worried about it. The safety position is in good hands going forward too. So, thanks for Kevin for checking in. Really appreciate you guys. TMFB up earlier in the chat. Note a few guys that like to chime in, but weren't able to because of normal chatters that weren't able to because of prior obligations and all that. But I appreciate everybody that tunes in. If you are not already subscribed over on YouTube, would really, really appreciate that. That helps get this channel and these videos out to the larger public. So I know I've said this in the past. I'm not particularly comfortable with please follow me, like and subscribe and all this. Forever. It's not something I'm super comfortable doing, but it does help the community grow and help get these things out. That's just what the algorithm likes to look for, is engagement in the comments and likes on the video, and then subscriptions to the channel. So I really appreciate everybody that has liked and subscribed the videos and the channels and all that in the channel. And if you have any friends, any Iowa State fan friends that you think would really enjoy this, send them a link to this stream. I try to get as many comments in here as we can. Once in a while I'll do the call-in stuff, try to get more people on the call-in stuff in the future. Some of these are a little bit tougher to do, and especially when I got a lot of material to get through before we get to the end of the episode. But especially as we get closer to the season and we're starting to actually talk about games, we'll definitely do more call-in type stuff as well. So if you have any friends, any Cyclone fan friends that you think would enjoy the show, please send it to them and have them check it out. All I can do is put on a good show and hope they stick around. So hopefully you guys can get this out via word of mouth. So again, really appreciate everybody for stopping by, for commenting. We'll be back again next week to talk some more Iowa State football. Maybe some recruiting news, maybe not. We're still kind of, it seems like it's kind of a anytime now situation with Evan Jacobson. We'll see, but appreciate everybody watching. We'll see you guys again next week. Just a few weeks away from Iowa State kicking off the season in Dublin. And everybody have a great rest of your week. Go State.